Hello. Everyone's still up? A lot of energy, right?
Come on. Shoot. Light this place up, Satish.
This is going to be high octane. We got Elise Neel here. She's back. She's one of the OGs in terms of industry partners for Newlab. We'll talk a bit more about that. And John Wheeler, one of our favorite founders here at Newlab. So it's great to have the gang back together. I just want to say that to both of you. Thank you for traveling from outside of New York to be here with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem.
So quick intros. I'm Satish Rao. I am the Chief Product Officer of Newlab. I head the department that does a variety of our applied innovation activities, and this is pairing enterprise, governments, and corporates that are looking to be early adopters of technologies with our great startups that are in our network. And so over to you, Elise, for a quick intro.
Hey, I'm Elise Neel. I'm the Global Head of Strategy and Innovation for PanasonicWell.
I'm John Wheeler, the co-founder, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Strategy Officer of Fermata Energy.
It's amazing. I got to get some more titles on my line there. So Newlab has built a really interesting model, almost entirely predicated on a few certain pillars when we talk about investment, infrastructure, and industry, and of course, at the core of that, the amazing DTEP startups that we work with around the world. But in order to make some of our programs really work well, there has to be certain things set up on the corporation side as well. The ability to be able to ingest technologies in a meaningful way, an ability to kind of create that culture internally around innovation and how you actually develop a strategy to integrate those things and scale them. And so Elise, when you were the SVP of New Business Incubation at Verizon, those are one of the few models I saw that were working really well and actually created a lot of that success in the program. So I'd love to turn to you first in terms of, what were the pillars that you built in that organization? What were you learning from the outside world that needed to be true in order for corporate innovation really to work? And how is that being mapped now to your role at Panasonic?
Yeah. So I think in general, when people think about corporate innovation, there's a wide variety of models that you can explore and use. One of the things that we knew when we first kind of started to engage with Newlab is you can really think about this infrastructure, not only just the physical building, but the structures and the programs and the processes that they put together as a way to feed talent, or as a way to build your IP portfolio, or as a way to just create a think tank. But we did not approach it that way. We had a set of hypotheses in the 5G future. We were really working at the very dawn of the technology, trying to figure out its capabilities and what new ways could we cultivate an ecosystem that would effectively create kind of compounding literal network effects. And instead, we treated this like a shopping mall with the longest ever integrated diligence process that had ever really occurred for Verizon and for many other corporates. And what that does, or what it did at the time, and you still do this today, is it allowed us an opportunity to then start to explore through the shepherding process of Newlab, kind of how do we think about new technology types that exist? How do we think about ways to exploit the technology for new products and services and categories? And how do I create an integrated team so that in the same way that we can create a garden and make a garden grow, we can provide some of the soil, and maybe Newlab can provide the seeded components in terms of how to go source the startups that are the right fit for our strategic interest areas. And then how do I create basically other individuals that can come around side the master gardener to help make it grow. And that's where, when I think about the timeline for Fermata, from the time that we first met to the time that we made our first strategic investment, it was pretty quick. Because that process, that infrastructure, this shopping mall created a really incredible acceleration model for us. And so when we think about, now in my career moving on from Verizon and into Panasonic, many of you might think to yourself, well, I'm now thinking about Debbie Gibson in the 80s with my boombox with Panasonic. However, if I flew here on a United flight from Colorado, which was powered by Panasonic Avionics, if you came here in a Tesla, you were supported by Panasonic, who powers all of the batteries for Tesla today. If you drank a beer last night, a Budweiser, that was delivered through Panasonic's global supply chain management company, et cetera. So it is a $60 billion global enterprise that really started over 100 years ago in hardware and is now leveraging PanasonicWell as the tip of the spear to help kind of think differently about how to empower families with new technology type software and services in order to create that universal wellness solution for a company that's over 100 years old. So the same corporate innovation models and the same way that we used and leveraged Newlab then are the things that Satish and I are now talking about kind of in my new era at PanasonicWell.
Amazing. And John, like hearing that coming from Elise, you're on the other side of the coin there. You're constantly out there trying to work with large enterprises. You need them to be your customer. You need them to be your investors, your scale partners, whatever it may be. maybe you can give a perspective on the approach with Verizon versus perhaps the other enterprises you've been working with. What felt different? What felt unique? Kind of speak to how that corporate innovation model has affected you in the business.
Yeah, well, when you look at Verizon, a lot of people, think they're just a wireless company, right? Someone you pay a monthly bill to every month. But the truth is they have, it's probably 10 different businesses. I mean, they have, of course, the connectivity business. They have a whole telematics business with vehicles. They have an advanced metering infrastructure utility business. They have connectivity through vehicles and telematics going back to the OEMs. So there is a tremendous amount of different verticals that they try to leverage off of their connectivity. And once we started working with them, immediately one of the first things that happened, like right from the get-go, is we got that visibility, and we got to go to things like Distributech, which is a huge grid infrastructure expo every year, and be in Verizon's booth. And I mean, just that alone, having a charger in our software be showcased with someone like Verizon just gives a startup credibility. Where if we're going to start getting a customer or working with somebody else, having that type of look, that type of visibility just enables lots of different things. We are working on a lot of different things with Verizon. Nothing to announce right now today, but there is so much ground that we could cover with a company like that, that good things are going to happen.
So let's do a bit of a play-by-play. So we're talking about the end of the story. Let's start from the beginning, because I think it's one of my favorite examples of how it kind of came together in the program. So Newlab, we launched what we called a 5G studio with Verizon. Elise Neel was the SVP of the new business incubation department there that was tasked with building new solutions on top of the 5G network. You were looking at Industry 4.0, mobility and energy, and you came to Newlab and said, hey, we could use your help around the hardware strategy side. How do you bring the hardware businesses to the table to really leverage the 5G network and the other products and services that Verizon has to offer? And the other part of the flywheel is we want to install some antennas in your building, which I thought was super cool. One of them might have punched a hole in our building that's still leaking today.
TBD, yeah.
And so that's something that we need to check
deniability.
on.
Yeah.
But what that built was we had one of your largest test beds here in the building, and then we went out to the world and started looking for startups across these spaces. We came across Fermata Energy, a bidirectional EV charging system, and we talked about how 5G Edge could be leveraged to kind of enable the technology performance, the product performance of what they were building. And so I'd like to just start with you. What would it look like on your side when you're looking at a bidirectional charging system? How does that strategy then turn into something internal?
Yeah, and maybe even before we went down that path, it was, hey, we think that there is something magical in terms of the working model here at Newlab. We have some hypotheses, Satish, and one of them at the time was, we think there's a play in energy. We think that 5G, which is a very unique technology, which has very discrete use cases, it is not like 4G, it's fundamentally different, and so we are looking for really, really specific accelerated use cases that can help deploy an ecosystem. So we had a hypothesis around energy. And we spent quite a bit of time kind of going back and forth around, hey, we think there might be something in V2X. We had developed some strategies internally, but frankly couldn't get them from PowerPoint to product, like at all internally. And so we said, can you help us? And so as he then went and curated the market, coming up with Fermata, it was like, okay, they have a really interesting play as you think about a combination of hardware in terms of the physical infrastructure itself, in terms of the battery and charging components. It had this software element, which was really exciting because we knew that that was an area kind of up the value chain that Verizon wanted to play in. And we knew at least that it might have an interesting 5G applicability. And so that three-pronged component, which is the same things that we're looking at, pretty much when you think about infrastructure in general, it allowed us to say, okay, how can we then prove whether or not do you actually really need 5G in order to make this work? And thankfully, John and his crazy team of bandits were up to the task, because it also takes a willing partner on the other side to say, hey, we have a hypothesis. Please don't think of me, like I cannot help your wireless bill, but I might be able to change the course of your company. Just stay with me. And so how do we kind of engage on that path? We met with a wide variety of players that you brought to the table, and we're really in the same way that, again, we kind of think about this as a shopping mall. We're looking at it from a corporate innovation perspective to say, who do we want to date for a little bit? Who do we want to kind of like go around the robin with. And I think we're looking for what are the innovators and entrepreneurs that bring that special something, who are the risk takers. And also when we were looking at the business, it was immediate to try to figure out, for me, trying to sell this internally, which I think we'll get to maybe a little bit later, is there an immediate opportunity for me to say, this is the customer? And if I can make Verizon the customer, if we can I see Verizon using this technology that gives me a leg up so I can prove an immediate value proposition within my span of control? And Fermata Energy kind of hit all the boxes.
And so, John, you're coming from the other end. We're approaching you. I think it was in a Ford workshop we first heard you speak as another program we were running at the time. Kind of pulled you aside and said, hey, we've got this other opportunity that might be interesting with Verizon. How did you perceive that? How did you start to think about how that could be a real strategy? How did it lead to the use cases you ended up piloting?
Well, to be honest, at first, this was at the end of 2020. And, we were trying to do a lot of different things. And, I've never heard of Newlab. I heard of Ford. But we were, concerned, like, is this another distraction? Oh my gosh, we say yes to too many different things. We got to focus on what we got to focus on. But thank God, we said yes. Let's do this. And I don't regret it at all, because that 2021 was probably the most transformative year we had at the company. And where we were in 2020, I mean, it was tough in 2020. And 2021, still the middle of COVID, we were in the middle of doing a Series A, and we with Carlyle, it's a little financial firm that was in thorough due diligence all year long, and then having this opportunity to basically showcase our stuff. The stakes were very high, right? But you have this stage and this chance to write a story, culminating in a really great outcome in September. And that spurred everything and really moved our company really to the next gear by the end of that year.
So let's keep going. If you can describe the pilot itself, like how that came together. You both can both jump in, how we designed that pilot together. And let's just tell the story of what ended up happening that day in the building. I think it's worth the audience hearing that. It's sort of a magical moment that led to real business outcomes afterwards. So maybe you can start with how that pilot came together, and Elise, please jump in.
Yeah, so what we did was take basically our system, our cloud-based software system and hardware and car. We connected it to the building, and then put all our software in the cloud and ran it over 5G on the AWS edge compute system to basically see how fast we could get that response time. The grid moves at the speed of light, so being able to control, power loads, when things turn on and off very fast is very helpful. And we got, response times under 100 milliseconds. Is that important? What does that mean? Well, one of the things, that is basically the response time that a utility substation needs in order to respond to different conditions in the grid. So in a sense, we can take an EV and turn it into a utility substation, kind of. Now, here's what happened, okay? This pilot was set up as a cohort, and we joined it, and at the beginning, the prize at the end was, I'll just say, a very, very big meeting full of VIPs that only, 2 or 3 of the teams would be selected to do. If you made it that far on, like Survivor Island, you're gonna make it to the final rose ceremony and get a chance to really demo in front of some people that could affect the course of your company. So we did that, and every, couple of months, a group of senior executives would be, of higher importance would come. And then the final day came to do that demo. And this was, again, in the middle of COVID. So the week before, I was living out of a barn in Virginia, isolating, because a lot was riding on this. Like, I can't get COVID and screw this up. And then, that day came, and we set up, everything was working, and that was September 1st, 2021.
Okay, pause right there.
There you
okay,
go.
So on my side, I'm like, hey, Satish, I think we're gonna turn this thing up. We're gonna give some exposure to Newlab. And literally by I think it's because I'm just so crazy. I went to my boss, the CEO of a Fortune 15 company. I'm like, hey, your next board meeting, I got it. And he's like, okay. And I said, we're going to host the Verizon board meeting here at Newlab. I'm going to go ahead and need like 3.5 hours. And I'm going to blow your socks off. And I promise I'm not going to embarrass myself or the company. We're going to do it. And maybe I batted my eyelashes. I don't know, but it worked. And he was like, okay, great. So the whole time we're like, this is going to be a really big deal, because it was my first time really going out to the board to say, okay, what we're doing here is not child's play. This is not some other little lab or some other think tank and like this is going to be cute. I'm talking about, if you want me to change the course of the company and really be an innovator, we're going to have to all get along, from the tippy top all the way down to the lowest level employees in the mailroom. We've all got to believe this thing. So we bring the board here. Okay, continue.
Yes. Yes.
On a fateful night.
And we didn't find out that until like, I think a couple of weeks before. And then that's when I stopped sleeping for a couple of weeks. And then we come up, here's me and Daniel, our software folks, getting ready, trying to, and I'm, the week before, pacing back in the barn, trying to think of what the heck I'm going to say. Now, like I said, that was September 1st. So why that is an important date is because that's also when Hurricane Ida had just ravaged Louisiana. And there were transmission lines in the bottom of the Mississippi. The V team was trying to get communication back online in Louisiana, which they were doing. They're really good at that. That's the first thing you need to do when a hurricane ravages. You got to get that communication, get the cell towers back on. But now that hurricane had moved up and now was over Brooklyn the night of that meeting. And it was actually a tragedy because that night Brooklyn flooded and some people lost their lives. But we, from our perspective, we had never tested our system in the middle of a hurricane. We've never done a live demo like that, right? You're not supposed to do live demos. You're definitely not supposed to do them in a hurricane. But we did it. It worked. The tech worked. And
we're talking like biblical proportions of rain, people. Like this is... we're screaming at each other because we're trying to talk over the sound on the metal tin roof.
It's like tap dancing on the roof whenever it
There's
rains.
flooding that's happening because we may or may not have punched a hole in the roof when we installed the 5G antenna.
It's still there, the leak.
I mean, yada, yada. And so literally, like, the power is flickering, and we're like, is Fermata Energy going to save the board demo? Is this going to work? Because the whole discharge component, like, it literally was the use case.
Yeah.
It was,
No, that was...
we have a disaster and require recovery in the off charge from the vehicle that is supposed to power the building over the 5G technology.
Yeah, and help power the building. We can't power the whole building with a car, but yes, that was the demo, and we were powering the building and the other demos. It actually worked, and it actually ended up. We left it on all night long, and it actually. I came back the next morning. I swam across the BQE, which was underwater, and it was still running. And actually, it's still running to this day, right now. There is actually one more demo left, and the demo is happening right now. We're actually powering some of the building right now, managing the load of the building with our system, next-gen system outside, and making money doing it, actually.
And it was one of my favorite stories because of the way it come together that actual day. And of course, there was an outcome. Verizon ended up investing along with Carlyle and continues to be a partner. And so, Elise, you and I were talking this morning. What we try to really push at Newlab is that these aren't pitch decks, these aren't science projects, these aren't just inspirational founders. They're building real technology and real businesses. And in essence, it's a real opportunity for enterprises like a Panasonic, like a Verizon, like a Ford, or whoever it may be. So how do you tell the corporate innovation folks in the audience, like, well, how they should be looking at businesses like John's in terms of an opportunity?
Yeah, I think there are 3 fundamentals of corporate innovation that are required in order for it to be lasting and to be systemic throughout the company. Because I don't know about you, but like, why would you invest so much if you just wanted to be a fly-by-night kind of experiments. So the first thing is it really requires full cultural alignment. So it can't just be the CEO who's interested in playing around with new toys, and it also can't be from the bottoms up of those individuals just saying, hey, I really need some new ideas. It really has to be embedded as a cultural framework throughout the organization. So the majority of time that I spent was really around socializing, expectation setting, nurturing kind of inside of the company, kind of how do you think generally about innovation there. The second pillar is that these are real businesses. It's not just, especially with a company like Verizon who's deployed this new whiz-bang 5G technology but isn't quite sure exactly at the onset what it's going to be used for, or Panasonic who's uncovering new ways to leverage AI and chipsets. You can't really be a technology looking for a problem to be solved. It's like, how do we really think about pairing those customer-specific problems and bringing those new businesses to life in order to actually cultivate an ecosystem? And then the third is thinking about the metrics. It's like if it's all just about net new business models and net new revenue, you're going to miss. Full stop. If it's only just about developing new IP, you will also just miss. If it's just about talent, or if it's just about investing in a return on, like all of those things, it really has to be this diversified model of metrics. And one of the things that is so powerful about the working model here that we embraced at Verizon and are also embracing at PanasonicWell is this fully embedded notion where you've got to, like, if you're going to do it, you got to do it. You got to like really do it. I staffed people to be here. They didn't live with John at the barn, but they were pretty much living here. They were here. They felt like they were a part of the Newlab team. We were literally apprentices to the gardening and the care and the feeding of what happened here. You cannot replicate this model. If you think that you're just one cute capital investment, one little like ironclad building away from innovation and you can cultivate startups, do not be fooled. There is magic that happens in the process, in the cultivation, in the branding, in the just enough far away but still close enough that happens here and in places like Newlab that will change the course of your company, but you got to go all the way in. You cannot dip your toe.
I appreciate that. That's perfectly said, and I think the more we see those corporate models in the world, it provides more opportunities to folks like John, the companies you're building. And so, John, last word to you. What would you say to also the corporate enterprise partners in the room that could be future partners of Fermata?
Yeah, well, especially a company like us, we can't, the nature of what we do specifically, and I think many companies that are trying to solve climate change or these, systemic issues, you can't do that without working with large companies to change them and to change the way they offer their products. We are at the intersection of mobility, energy, grid. We have to work with large automotive companies. We have to work with utilities. We have to work with energy companies. We have to work with grid equipment companies. And we have to bring all of those together. They are in many ways our customer, just as much as the end user or driver. So that is a huge challenge for us. And what Newlab does is allows us to start writing the first chapters of that story and then bring someone in like Verizon or Ford or whomever you have here, not only to help write the rest of it, but to also make it come true. Because that, if you don't take it to the next level and get that investment and get that working relationship to do it, it's not going to happen.
Amazing. I told you it was going to go fast with these two up here. That is it for us. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Elise. Thank you, John, for the panel. Great job. Thank you.